Look at anything red right now, and the light coming off it isn't red at all. Wavelength carries no color. Your brain paints the red on, somewhere behind your eyes, in the dark. It does the same to your favorite song, turning moving air into music. You have never touched the world directly, not once. So let me say it straight. You've never seen reality, and the philosopher who worked that out drew the opposite conclusion from the one you'd expect. Not that your senses trap you, not that the world dissolves, but that it works in a way stranger and much calmer than you'd guess. They called him Spinoza. He wrote it down in 1677, before anyone could scan a brain, before anyone knew a neuron existed, and he got there from an argument that has nothing to do with biology at all. Stay for that part. Start with how little actually gets in. The electromagnetic spectrum runs from radio waves longer than a city block to gamma rays smaller than an atom. You see a band of it about 300 nanometers wide. The full range runs trillions of times wider than your slice of it. Everything else floods this room right now. Radio, infrared, ultraviolet. You are simply not equipped. And the sliver you do get isn't delivered clean. Photons hit the back of your eye and cells fire. The optic nerve carries no picture at all. It carries a pattern of electrical spikes, and your brain builds a world out of it in the dark, using guesses trained on everything you've seen before. Watch how confident it gets about those guesses. A hole sits in each of your retinas where the optic nerve punches through. Nothing lands there. You don't see a hole. Your brain fills it in with whatever it decides belongs there, and you have never once caught it doing this. A honeybee walks into the same garden and finds ultraviolet markings painted across the flowers. A rattlesnake reads the heat coming off a mouse behind a wall. A mantis shrimp carries 12 kinds of color receptor. You have 3. None of them hallucinate. Each one takes a real signal and builds a different world out of it. So whose version is the room? One famous answer has poisoned the well for 400 years. René Descartes looked at the same problem and concluded that you're sealed in. If you only ever get the inner picture, the outer world drops to a rumor. Maybe there's a table. Maybe a demon is feeding you table-shaped signals. You can't check from in here. So Descartes split the universe in two. On one side, he put thinking stuff, you, the mind, the thing having the experience. On the other, he put extended stuff. Everything with the size and a shape, including your own body. Two kinds of substance, two separate worlds. The picture feels intuitive, and most people still carry some version of it. You feel like a passenger looking out through your face, but it breaks immediately. If mind and matter are genuinely different kinds of thing, how does one move the other? You decide to lift your arm, and the arm lifts. Where does that happen? Descartes went looking for the contact point and landed on a small gland near the center of the brain, which explained nothing. He had made a gap so wide that nothing could cross it. That's the trap. And almost everyone who says you can never really know the world is still standing in it. Spinoza refused the question. He argued there aren't two substances. There's one reality, which he called God or nature, using the two words interchangeably. That identification earned him most of a life, branded as a heretic. Mind and matter aren't two things that need to touch. They're two ways of describing the same thing. Thought and extension, he called them. Two attributes of one substance. Think about a piece of music. You can describe it as a pattern of frequencies over time, or you can describe it as grief. Neither description hides underneath the other. There's one event, available under two descriptions. He makes the same claim about you. Your mind isn't a ghost operating a machine. Your mind describes your body from the inside. Same individual, two attributes. And notice what he isn't saying. Not that the mind sits on top and the body underneath. Not that the body is the real thing and the mind is a byproduct it gives off. Neither attribute outranks the other, which separates this from every version you've heard where the brain does the actual work and you supply the exhaust. And here the whole worldview lands. Stoicism tells you to accept what you can't control. Spinoza tells you why. You aren't a will parachuted into a body that keeps disobeying you. You're one continuous piece of the world. The reason you can't control most of it is that you were never standing outside it. So the gap Descartes couldn't cross? There was no gap. He drew it himself. Now comes the part that stopped me. In the Ethics Part 2, Spinoza is working through how a mind comes to have ideas about anything outside itself, and he writes a line that reads like it was lifted from a modern textbook. The ideas we have of external bodies, he says, indicate the constitution of our own body, more than the nature of the external bodies. Read that again. Your idea of the thing tells you more about you than about the thing. A neuroscientist would say exactly that about color. Red isn't in the light. Red tells you about your retina, your cortex, your history. Spinoza got there in 1677 with no instruments and no imaging, working from an argument about what a finite piece of the world can register about the rest of it. He goes further in the same stretch of the book. An affection of your body, he says, never gives you adequate knowledge of the body that caused it. Left to the ordinary run of experience, you get confusion. Not wrong. Confused, partial, mixed in with your own state. I want to be careful here. He didn't anticipate neuroscience, and he wasn't doing science. He reached the same shape by a completely different road, which strikes me as stranger than if he'd simply guessed at biology. It would be easy to hear all of this as bad news. If everything you know is filtered through your own constitution, aren't you stuck? Isn't this Descartes' demon again, wearing a lab coat? No. And that difference carries the most important idea in this video. Descartes built a barrier. A mind on one side, a world on the other, and no way across. Spinoza has no barrier because he has no two sides. You're not sealed in a container looking out. You are a finite mode of nature, a local, temporary way the one thing arranges itself. So why is your knowledge partial? Not because something is blocking you, because you're small. You're a limited piece of an enormous causal system, registering the parts of it that happen to make contact with you. A cell in your fingertip doesn't fail to see the whole body, because a wall is in the way. It's one cell. That distinction changes what the limit means. A veil imprisons you. Belonging doesn't. You can learn more, trace more causes, form clearer ideas, and for Spinoza, that isn't a workaround. That defines what becoming freer means. And notice what you still can't do. You can't step outside and check your model against the raw world. Not because the door is locked, because there's no outside to step into. I want to be careful about what that actually buys us. Spinoza's move dissolves one specific problem, and many scholars would put it exactly that way. If mind and body are one thing under two descriptions, the question of how they interact stops making sense. There's no causal traffic left to explain, and the gland becomes unnecessary. Critics have pointed out that this may relocate the mystery rather than remove it. Saying there's one substance with two attributes doesn't explain why it has those two or why the mental description exists at all. And the hardest question survives untouched. Why is there something it is like to see red? Why isn't all of this happening in the dark with nobody home? Philosophers call that the hard problem of consciousness, and it stays exactly as open today as in 1677. Spinoza doesn't solve it. Neither does neuroscience. Anyone who tells you otherwise wants to sell you something. I'd rather leave a real question open than close it with a satisfying sentence. What he offers isn't an answer to that question. He offers a better place to stand while you ask it. So go back to the red. The apple still sits there. The wavelength stays real. Your eyes are real, and the thing they're responding to doesn't need your permission to exist. Nothing here makes the world thinner. What changes? The picture of you inside it. You were probably carrying a version where you sit behind your eyes, receiving reports from outside, hoping they're accurate. That version has a quiet loneliness built into it. Everything real sits out there, and you sit in here. Spinoza's version has you as one of the ways the world shows up to itself, not a witness to nature, an instance of it. That hands you a smaller part than the one you thought you were playing, and a far less lonely one. The redness isn't the world failing to reach you, and it isn't you failing to reach the world. It happens where one piece of the universe meets the rest of it. You never saw reality from the outside. There was never an outside to see it from.